It was a little bit concerning having a guy with an Islamic State patch calling me an unbeliever, trying to get me to get out of the car.
I mean, you really are brave. I think I told you that over and
Thank
over
you.
again. But was there ever a moment where you were like, shit, I really need to get out of here? This is not good.
There was one instance like that where I was a bit nervous. So there was this was on December 8th. It was the first day, and I'd left Umayyad Square, and I was trying to go to Assad's palace. I wanted to get inside of Assad's palace, and it was barricaded off. There were checkpoints with soldiers, and I approached, and we're driving up. I'm trying to get in, and the soldiers guarding it had very distinctive uniforms, and they had a little patch with a black flag that we will all recognize. And so all these, and that's something that has not been made clear, because you do see lots of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham fighters wearing patches that we in the West would recognize as the patch of the Islamic State. And I've heard people say, oh no, it's just the Shahada. And it's like the Taliban has the Shahada on their flag too, but the Taliban flag doesn't look like the ISIS flag. That's a very specific, stylized version. So I saw some soldiers at this checkpoint with these IS flags on, which again, like we talked about how there was the schism, and Shara didn't want to ally with ISIS, so, he declares allegiance with Al-Qaeda and becomes al-Nusra. So one thing I'm wondering, and nobody was really ever clear on, is why are there so many fighters within HTS who are still wearing Islamic State patches? And at the Captagon facility that we were talking about a few minutes ago, there was a guy there who was showing me his camera roll and his Snapchat memories. And he showed me a picture of him with one of those little ISIS flags on his shoulder on a patch. And he said, that's me when I was in ISIS back in 2015. So the fact that there are, Islamic State veterans who are now within HTS, some of whom are still wearing those
Veterans.
Islamic State patches, is very concerning. And I know they're wearing those patches because I saw them myself many times. Yeah. And there's one time we're approaching Assad's palace, and it's all these guys with ISIS patches, and we're trying to go through, and we're arguing that we're journalists, and this one guy comes up with the car, and he's like, Muslim? Like, as a question, and he's got his ISIS patch on his plate carrier, and I'm like, no, Christian. And he's like, oh, so kafir, and he gets pissed. He's getting furious, and he starts calling me a kafir. And that, for those who don't know, that means unbeliever. And I'm like, no, not kafir, Christian. Like, and he's like starts to like reach into the car, and he's like trying to open the door, and he's like keeps shouting at me that I'm a kafir. And then his commander comes up and like pushes him back, and he's like, no, Sahafi, which is Arabic for journalist. So, and then after that, we quickly sped off. So it was a little bit concerning having a guy with an Islamic State patch calling me an unbeliever, trying to get me to get out of the car, until his commander intervened on my behalf and said, no, I'm a journalist, leave me alone. So that was a little concerning, but I stayed for another month and a half after that.
Did you see any other than the images that you've shared already? Like, did you see any like brute force in front of you? Like, did you see any people being shot at or anything
No,
like this? Just
not. So again, there were. Syria is a much larger country than Lebanon, and if there was unrest in one part of the country, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we were anywhere near it. It's like while we were there were clashes between the Syrian National Army, which is backed by Turkey, and the Syrian Democratic Forces in Manbij, and so like there were clashes up there between those two groups. Or like I mentioned earlier, there was the incident where like HTS like burned that Christmas tree in Hama, or like when the Israelis invaded in the south, and there was a protester I met who was shot through the stomach by the IDF in Quneitra. So all of these things are happening at the same time, but where I am in Damascus, there was no combat that I was able to see. And again, I mean, Damascus itself, it fell without, there's very little fighting. I mean, Damascus fell basically with no fighting. It was very easy for Hayat Tahrir al-Sham to take Damascus.
Colin, you've been so generous with your time and everything today. Is there anything that we're missing? Is there a story that you'd want to highlight or an experience that you feel needs to be shared before we finish this conversation?
Yeah, I would say it was a monumental experience, to say the least. It was one of those periods where decades worth of history can happen within a few days, and it was really both remarkable and very concerning. All the stuff we saw. I mean, a lot of the stuff we saw in Syria was horrifying and confusing, and there's so many different factions. Everything's happening all at once. And as one rebel group is taking over a country from a regime, a neighboring country is invading to expand its security apparatus. Meanwhile, another country to the north, Turkey, is attacking, the Kurds
Yeah.
in the northeast. So it was just such a messy situation.